everyone. Thank you all for joining us today. I'm Nika, founder of Teens and Friends United and your host for today. Thank you for joining us. Seeing how everyone was talking about how action is needed for not doing anything themselves and asking others to take responsibility, I thought to make a group where everybody, especially teens, can join and participate in changing the world with small and big actions. Let me introduce you to today's guest, Erin McCreles, conservation scientist from the Rainforest Trust. I'll hand over to you now.
Should I introduce myself?
Yeah, can you tell us more about yourself and the Rainforest Trust?
Sure. So my name is Erin McCreles. I'm a conservation scientist at Rainforest Trust. Rainforest Trust is a global, internationally operating organization that's based in the United States. We work in tropical countries throughout Africa, Asia, and the Americas to protect rainforests and other tropical habitats. And specifically, we work by partnering with local communities and organizations to purchase and designate lands as long-term protected areas to improve species conservation and habitat conservation.
Oh, wow.
And as the conservation scientist, my job is to use data sets on things like species distribution and threat levels, habitat quality, climate importance of different ecosystems to try to understand where are the most important places for us to work and what has the effectiveness of our work been so far.
Oh, wow, that's interesting. So what are some of the projects of the Rainforest Trust?
Well, we have our global portfolio of protected areas is, I believe, somewhere around 25 million acres that we've protected since we were founded in 1988. Our protected areas range in size from very, very small, just a couple of acres, up to millions of acres. Let's see, I'm trying to think of a good example. Let's see. we have hundreds of protected areas, so I'm having trouble picking out just one. I'll give you the example. We have lots of protected areas in the tropical Andes, Western South America through Colombia, Ecuador, and Peru, where we work with local communities and indigenous communities to protect land and species that occur there.
Oh, that's cool. Do you have any in the Amazon rainforest?
Say that again, I'm sorry?
Do you have any protected areas in the Amazon rainforest?
We actually do not currently. We have areas in other parts of Brazil, specifically the Atlantic forest. And we do have areas in the Amazon basin in not Brazil, but the other countries I mentioned, Ecuador, Peru. But we are working on areas in the Amazon, Brazilian Amazon as well. Or we're interested in that area. We have yet to officially work there.
Oh, that's cool. Well, so how does your work help the flora and fauna that live in the rainforests?
Our goal is to establish long-term protection to prevent any of the threats that can damage the ecosystem or species that occur there. So that might be deforestation, cutting down trees for agriculture or livestock or timber harvest, or it might be poaching of species for hunting or subsistence or wildlife trade. So our goal is to create protected areas and then make sure they're effectively managed in the long term to make sure that any sort of illegal activities like that are prevented.
So how do you manage them? Are they do you have like police or something like that? Or...
Well, we as Rainforest Trust, we do not manage them. We partner with organizations on the ground. So usually a nationally operating or locally operating, say nonprofit in a country will come to us and have an area that they're interested in protecting, and we'll support them in protecting that area and in developing management plans and patrolling plans. So part of what our partner organizations do is develop management plans that include wildlife patrols. So people that go out and, like park rangers that go out and monitor for illegal activities throughout the protected area.
Oh yeah. So does do you do science projects in those protected areas, or do you just let them be except for monitoring them?
Sorry, can you say that again?
Do you do any science research projects in those areas, or do you just let them be except for making sure that no one disturbs them?
We, again, as Rainforest Trust, we do not do any science in those areas. Sometimes our local partners, I don't think it's very common for them to undertake sort of in-depth scientific research projects, but they do often monitor the most threatened species that occur in those areas. So if we worked with them to establish a protected area specifically to protect, a certain bird species or a certain frog species, they will do monitoring and population assessments to see how that species is doing in the protected area over time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. So, where else do you operate?
Well, we have, just to give you a list of countries, we have projects in the Congo. We have several projects in Madagascar, Indonesia, Thailand, Cambodia. I could list lots of other countries, Mexico, Guatemala. We really span the global tropics.
Oh, wow, that's very cool. Like, how was it founded then? Since it was founded like really early. I mean, really early. There wasn't much.
Yeah, we were founded in 1988 with exactly the goal that I mentioned, creating protected areas to protect threatened species. We mostly started with pretty small land purchase projects in the Americas, especially focused on threatened species conservation. And we've grown, the organization has gone through many iterations, but all with the same overall goal. Our projects and budget and the size of our operations has greatly increased, especially in the last 5 to 7 years, I would say, where we've greatly increased the number of places that we work, the number of projects we have. And we've also expanded to focusing not just on species conservation, but also, as I mentioned, the quality of forests that we're interested in protecting and places that store and sequester large amounts of carbon to try to help the climate crisis as well.
So, who were the first members of the Rainforest Trust?
I'm sorry, can you ask that again?
Who were the first members and founders of the Rainforest Trust?
I'm afraid that I don't know that. It was long before my time, and I know who some of the early operators were, but I have to say I can't remember off the top of my head.
Okay. So,
that information is on our website, I believe. So if people are interested in it, they can take a look.
So, how many departments are there, and what do they specialize in?
So I'm in the conservation department. Our department consists of basically 2 operating teams. One is the strategy team, which I'm on, and we look at trying to prospect for new projects, do the priority setting like I've been talking about, try to establish relationships with new potential partners. Then there's also the programs team, which primarily the people on that team manage the projects that we have. So they're sort of in day-to-day contact with the partners that we're working with on the ground in these different countries. And they're managing the creation and management of these protected areas throughout our work with each partner. Then we have a marketing, communications, and philanthropy team, which does all of our fundraising, of course, public outreach, so our website, other outreach materials. I guess those are the main, and marketing. Yeah, so those are the 2 main departments that everyone falls into.
Okay. So, well, so, what would you say is the most endangered species in?
Oh gosh, that's a really hard question. I don't know if I could tell you a single species that's the most endangered.
I guess a couple of species then. Maybe I thought that orangutans are quite endangered. How are they in the state?
Orangutans are quite endangered. I would say that the most threatened species, I hesitate to give you a single one, but the most threatened are the ones that have really small ranges. So species that occur, there are some species that occur over a wide range, like across the span of one country or two countries or three countries. And then there are some, frogs are a good example of species that can have really, really narrow ranges. They might just occur on one mountaintop. Or, their fish is actually something people don't think about quite as much. There are fish that occur, just in a single lake or in a single stream. We look sort of more broadly, we look at taxonomic groups. So, the vertebrates that we look at most commonly that are best understood are birds, mammals, amphibians, and reptiles. I'm not sure we know enough to really say which of those groups is the most threatened. They're all threatened in different ways. We know more about birds and mammals than we do the other groups just because they've been studied more. So we're still learning about, we're still finding amphibian and reptile species that we didn't know existed. That's even more true of plants and invertebrates. So the reason I'm hesitant to give you a single species is that we take a really broad approach and try to look at across all taxonomic groups and all species that might be facing threats.
Mm-hmm. So you said that lots of species are yet to be discovered. How many do you think?
Oh my goodness. The estimates for that range very, very, very widely.
What's the lowest and what's the highest?
I've seen estimates that, there could be millions of species that we haven't found yet. That's not true, again, for things like birds and mammals. Like, we'll probably find a few more birds and mammals. We certainly haven't found everything. But it's really the groups like insects and plants that there are just multitudes of unknown species.
How come insects? How come there's so many of them?
That's an interesting scientific question. I'll be honest, I'm not sure I know the answer to that. I'm not an insect expert.
Okay.
But in general, this gets back to, I studied evolution in school. And there are lots of, understanding why there is the number of species there are in the world and how those evolutionary patterns happen is a huge field of study. So there's not a simple answer. But one of the things that can lead to rapid speciation and creation of lots of new species is a short life cycle. So species that are reproducing quickly and creating new generations at a very high rate have more likelihood of dispersing, becoming isolated in different areas, undergoing evolutionary changes that make them unique species. That's a very, very broad answer and doesn't specifically answer the question about insects, but
yeah, makes sense. So has deforestation decreased in the last few years?
In some regions, yes. In some regions, no. It's a very country-specific problem and trend. For example, deforestation in Brazil was a huge problem for many years throughout the 80s and 90s. The trends actually greatly decreased for a while, and then recently they've been going up again. And the factors that drive deforestation are huge. The political situation in a country, the market, the drive and market value for different forest products and agricultural products that drive cutting down of the rainforest. there are lots of different factors that drive deforestation and cause it to fluctuate in different regions over time.
How much would you say the Rainforest Trust affected this decrease slash increase?
We definitely have helped to decrease deforestation. I've actually been doing some analyses to track deforestation in our protected areas, and some forest loss does occur. We have not been able to prevent deforestation completely, and that's actually true. Global studies have also been done, not just of Rainforest Trust protected areas, but protected areas globally. And forest loss does occur in protected areas. There's, as hard as we try, I think it's nearly impossible to achieve the goal of completely halting forest loss. The analysis that I completed recently showed that most of our protected areas, more than 90% of our protected areas, have maintained 90% or 95%, excuse me, of the forest cover, of the original forest cover in those areas. So we've done a pretty good job. As I said, we've protected more than 25 million acres, which is a lot for a small organization, but it's also in some ways kind of a drop in the bucket when you're looking at global rainforests. So we're doing our part, but much more is needed from us, and we're trying to expand our operations to have a bigger impact. And of course, other organizations around the world need to be doing this work as well.
Rainforest Trust, what's it called? Do any forestation?
We don't reforestation, you said?
Yeah.
We have not actively supported reforestation projects. A few areas where we've worked, I believe, as work in those areas not, directly related to our projects and work directly with those partners, but I believe some reforestation has occurred, and it's something that we're increasingly talking about. It may or may not be a direction that we go in the future, but we do recognize that reforesting degraded lands is really important for species conservation, for climate protection, and for general environmental health.
I saw you use donations to fund your projects. Is there any other ways that you fund your projects?
We fund our projects almost entirely through donations. If you go to our website, you can find specific projects that you might be interested in donating to, or you can also donate to more general funds to support our more general operations. But all or nearly all of donations, the way that we that our organization is set up is really pretty amazing, in that all or nearly all of any person's individual donation goes directly to conservation projects.
Oh, that's great. So I saw one place it said donations doubled. What's that mean?
That just means that we've been much more successful at fundraising and bringing in more and more money to support our projects.
I saw the first project on your website. It says, I think, something about fighting climate change.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was $10 million. How long do you think it will take to raise all that money?
I'm afraid, as the conservation scientist, I do not know the answer to that question. That is a question for our philanthropy experts.
What are you going to do with all of it once it's done? Once you collect it all?
We will use that money to protect areas that are important for storing and sequestering carbon in the ecosystem. That includes places like large swaths of intact tropical forests. So we look at places like the Brazilian Amazon, the Congo Basin, forest in Indonesia. We also look at areas that are not your traditional moist tropical rainforest, but that are extremely important for storing carbon. Those include peat ecosystems. For example, Indonesia has lots of peat forests, and other regions in the tropics do as well. And also mangroves along coastlines are really, really important for carbon storage. So we're increasingly looking at those areas. So we will use those donations to identify and try to protect those areas that are important for climate mitigation.
Oh, great. So you mentioned mangroves. How come they can grow in seawater? That's confusing.
Mangroves have specific adaptations that help them deal with high salinity, with salt in the water. So it's just an amazing feat of plant evolution that they've evolved to survive in that harsh environment that many other plants cannot.
It's just amazing.
It is. It's really amazing.
So do you have any projects that involve volunteers?
That's a good question. The way that we operate, it's hard to answer that question because, again, the way we operate is by partnering with local organizations working on the ground in these different countries. And I, as a scientist, I'm actually not closely interacting with our partners on the ground. I'm sure the answer to your question is that yes, many of our partners working in these different countries have lots of volunteers working for them. But I'm sure that varies across organization, and I actually really don't know the extent to which that is the case.
Okay. So how's COVID affected the Rainforest Trust?
I'm sorry, can you ask again?
How has COVID affected the Rainforest Trust?
That's a very good question. It has slowed down some of our operations. Our partners working on the ground in these different countries have definitely been affected by COVID. It has affected their budgets. It's affected their staffing and ability to establish and maintain the protected areas. It has also affected, early on in the pandemic, it affected our donations as people were, I think, less likely to give. Although in the months after the pandemic first started, we've actually continued to be quite successful at fundraising. And we actually created what we call a COVID relief fund, where we came up with a specific pot of money to help our partners deal with the challenges that they face because of COVID.
Oh, so how's that help them?
I think it supports, again, this is more, to be honest, more questions for our programs team, but I believe it helps them support, whatever staffing or monitoring, patrolling, or even technology work that suffered as a result of COVID.
So that would be tests then. Okay. I know some people do tests every week. So
COVID tests?
Yeah.
I don't think we supported COVID tests specifically. I think our donations were more, or our support was more focused on managing the protected areas.
Oh, okay. So, do you know approximately how many volunteers you had last year?
I'm afraid I don't. I actually have no idea.
Do you know if any volunteers can be under 18?
I believe they can.
Yay.
Definitely. Yeah.
Finally, somewhere where they can. I keep going, no, these people can't do it. These people
Yeah.
Help the people that don't allow people below 18.
Yeah. Yeah. We would happily accept volunteers of any age.
Oh, yay.
And we actually, I know that school children of various ages around the world have gotten excited about the work we do and learned about it and come up with their own fundraising campaigns. I have not been around to see those happening in person, but I know that they've happened, and students have actually been very successful at raising money to support our work.
Oh, that's really nice.
Yeah, it's really neat.
So, we're talking about COVID. So, did that affect the rainforest? Like less air pollution? Did that happen at all?
That's a good question. I believe that COVID did reduce air pollution. I'm not sure that is the greatest impact that COVID would have had on the rainforest. COVID, getting back to the effect that COVID had on Rainforest Trust operations, in general, globally, I think there was a decrease in local capacity to manage and monitor protected areas. So I haven't seen numbers on this, but I would not be surprised if there was an increase in illegal activities in tropical protected areas because there was less availability for, patrollers, for example, or park rangers to go out and try to prevent those things from happening.
I saw David Attenborough made a movie about like the effect of COVID. I think it was called The Perfect Planet, and they like showed how in cities everything like got much better for animals.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think there was an example of deers and monkeys in a city, which was really cool. I was like, oh wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
So do you think that could like help if like I'm not saying that if COVID continued, but if we like reduce the amount we drive, would that help at all for rainforests or?
It would help in the larger sense of reducing carbon emissions, which helps the whole world because climate change and climate extremes will affect the rainforest just as they will affect other parts of the world or other ecosystems. I'm trying to think if there are other ways that reduce travel or reduced human impact. I think that's the primary way that I can think of is by reducing the impacts of climate change.
I am. There's something. Wait, I forgot about it now. Then there we go. Noise pollution.
Noise pollution. Yeah.
Does that happen in rainforests or around rainforests? And does that affect it?
It certainly happens around rainforests. I mean, we as Rainforest Trust try to focus on areas that are pretty pristine, that are already in good condition, which would generally mean that they're further from, cities or airline routes or things like that, developments that would cause lots of noise pollution. But they certainly do. I mean, there are definitely places in the world where the rainforest comes, butts up directly against development, human development, and the noise pollution and other effects of being near human development will definitely affect the species that occur throughout the rainforest and especially in that sort of border area. Animals might be disturbed. Invasive plants might enter from the human dominated areas into the rainforest, things like that.
I saw some of your projects, like the some that per acre is like $1,000, even more. But others per acre it was around like less than $1. So I was confused, like how's that work?
I'm sorry, you're asking about the sort of cost per acre of our projects and how that varies.
Yeah.
Yeah, that can vary hugely. I mean, just as a general sort of explanation or guide, some of the areas where we work, we do expensive, basically very expensive land purchases. If there's a small area that we know is very important to a specific species and we want to improve the conservation status of that species, we'll decide that the conservation benefit of working in that area is worth the high price. That's especially true for private land that we support the local partner in purchasing. Another kind of conservation action that we take is supporting the designation, like the formal public designation of a protected area. So creating something like a state park or community or a national park. Those tend to be cheaper. They tend to, this isn't always the case, but generally they tend to be larger areas of land. And the process for supporting formal designation is cheaper than buying the land outright. So that's a large part of the explanation why there's a huge difference in the cost of different projects.
When you buy land, like who do you buy it from? Is it like I mean, the government or?
Individual landowners.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So there might be a farmer who owned a plot of land and no longer wants to own that land and puts it up for sale. And we or our partners identify, we see that that land is up for sale. And if we believe it has high conservation value, we will use the money that came in from our donors to purchase it or to support our local partners in purchasing it.
Oh, wow. So, like, I wanted to ask if you have a favorite rainforest species.
I think I've spent a reasonable amount of time in the Central American rainforest, and I find that the birds that live there are just amazing. So the first things that come to mind are probably macaws and toucans. They're beautiful and strange and charismatic, and I think they're really neat.
I mean, why do they got such big beaks?
I believe they use their beaks to crack large seeds. So every animal is adapted through evolution to do what it does in the environment, eat the foods that it specializes in, live in the environment that it lives in. So I think toucan's an example of a bird that evolved to eat large seeds and uses their large beak to break open seeds and access foods that other animals without those large beaks probably can't access.
So why is it so? Why is its beak so colorful?
That's another interesting evolutionary question. Everything you see when you look at an animal is a result of evolution, and there are different forces driving the evolution of everything you see. So animal color, animal shape, animal size, shape of its beak, shape of its eyes. Color is an interesting one. Sometimes animals evolve color. This is clearly not the case for the toucan, but animals can evolve color that helps them camouflage into the environment. They might evolve color to make them stand out, to signal to predators that they're poisonous, to attract, flowers might be red because they attract hummingbirds that have evolved to key in on red flowers. Toucan's beak specifically, I don't know. I would guess that's a case of sexual selection where animals, I think it tends to be males that have the large, colorful, showy traits become more attractive to females and so are more successful at producing offspring.
How many species live in the rainforest?
That's a really interesting question. Off the top of my head, I'm afraid I don't know.
Maximum? Minimum?
Many millions.
That works, I guess. So can you tell us about some of them? Like, for example, maybe the red panda or orangutan?
Sure. They're amazing animals that again have evolved to specialize in the area where they live. I'll just say I tend to focus my work on large data sets, so I am actually not an expert in any specific species, in the things that they eat or where exactly they live. I look at large trends of, hundreds of species that occur over large areas. I could give you one quick example that I have studied a little bit, not on the ground, unfortunately, but I've learned a lot about is the eye is a mammal. It's a type of lemur that lives in Madagascar. And it does occur in some of our protected areas. It's about the size of a house cat, and it has some really neat adaptations. It's nocturnal, and it has weird modified fingers that help it scrape into crevices in tree trunks to dig out insects. And it's just a very neat, unique species. It's the only species, I believe it has its own family. So when you're looking at the taxonomic breakdown of mammals, for example, there's the class and then the more specific levels of family, genus, species. And sometimes, there might be dozens or hundreds of species within a genus, or many genuses or genera within a family. And the II is an example of a family where that's the only species. So it's evolutionary, really unique.
Oh, wow. Are there any other species that you know that do that thing with the family? That are only one family and only one species?
I know there are some, and I have to say off the top of my head, I can't remember. It's pretty rare, though. There are very few cases where that's the case.
Are there any subspecies, though? Because I know for the hopu, there used to be they used to be classified as one species, but then they got separated into 7 because they're a sort of subspecies. Is that what happened with the lemurs?
Lemurs in general, I'm not sure. I'm sure that's the case at least some. It's not. I know that's not the case with the II, but that definitely happens. I would assume within lemurs, and I mean, as we learn more and more about species, one of the more well-known cases that happened recently, as animal groups were reassessed, is that the African elephant was always assumed to be one species and was recently divided into forest elephants and savanna elephants. I believe not just subspecies, but they were divided actually into 2 separate species. But that's the kind of change that happens as we learn more and more about species.
How many species?
Sorry, there was a background noise.
Yeah, I got lots of background noise. Sorry about that. I'm in a very touristic area, but it's supposed to be quiet. But yeah, it's never quiet. But my garden is very nice.
It sounds very nice. Yeah.
Lots of cicadas, which is annoying, but nice. It's just annoying when they're loud.
Yeah.
And that's how many species have gone extinct in the last year in rainforests?
Again, I really don't know. Many of these questions are very specific, and I would actually have to do a little bit of research to learn the answers to them.
Approximately in the last 10 years, then, how many would you say?
I'm afraid I don't know. I would guess in the range of, species extinctions, they're happening I'll say more generally, they're happening at a rate of honestly about 1,000 times the sort of natural. Species go extinct naturally. It's just part of the way the world works. But they're occurring at about 1,000 times the background rate right now, globally. But they're still not very, very common. I would have to do some research to learn the, sort of how many extinctions are happening per year, and then how often that is happening within the rainforest specifically. I would guess, don't quote me on this, but I would guess in the range of maybe tens to maybe as many as a few dozen.
Oh, okay.
The other thing that might be an overestimate, or it might be an underestimate. I think part of the problem is that we just don't know. We don't know, as we discussed earlier, we don't know how many species live in the rainforest, and we also don't know, a lot of times things go extinct before we even found them, or they go extinct without us knowing, because it's hard to, you can't keep track of every species out there. So something might have gone extinct and we don't know it yet.
Well, another specific question. I saw that recently there was a new discovery about a virus-eating protest in the Mediterranean and the Gulf of Maine. Do you think there could be something similar in rainforests? Maybe.
I'm sorry, about what?
Well, there was a discovery of a potential virus-eating protist in the Mediterranean and Gulf of Maine. Do you think there could be something similar maybe in rainforests?
Probably. Many of I don't know the answer to that specifically, but I do know that many of our medicines have been derived from plants and chemicals that have been found in tropical rainforests. So tropical rainforests are full of plants and animals and bacteria that have amazing qualities that can be useful to humans and are amazing in their own right, and that we need to learn about.
Also, they're like gigantic size. Like everything's
Really?
like times the size. Like why?
Yeah.
I wanted to ask about the fires in the Amazon rainforest. Like, it's a rainforest. How could there be ongoing fires for so long? How does that make sense?
Well, there are lots of explanations. I mean, even a moist forest can burn. The Amazon rainforest is increasingly modified and being chopped down for livestock and agricultural and human development. As the land and ecosystem changes, sometimes it becomes more flammable, basically. There's actually a larger problem in the Amazon, which is that as the forest changes, and also the larger problem of climate change is actually changing the moisture levels in the forest in the local climate. So some areas might be more prone to fires. And then once fires start, it can be very, very hard to control them. So a fire can spread and just keep spreading as the land continues to burn.
How long has this fire been going for?
Again, I don't know if there's a simple answer to that question. Fires have been happening in the Amazon for years, on and off. I don't know. I'm actually not sure exactly which. I'm sure there are many happening in the Amazon right now. I'm not sure which one you're referring to specifically.
I just said that there was that one that's been continuing since 2019, which shocked me.
Yeah, I would certainly believe that.
Well, how can is there a way that we can stop them? Because
I mean, with a lot of political will, financial resources, and technological resources, we can try to fight forest fires. But I mean, there are definitely times when the fire is larger than really we're able to control. So I think depending on the situation, it can take indefinitely long to try to get a forest fire under control. And it's an ongoing problem because new fires are always being started. So even if one ends, another one might begin, or there might be two separate ones that merge. So it's a very large and complex problem.
So, are they part of the natural cycle as well?
They are. I don't believe that's the case for the tropical rainforest. Tropical rainforests are not generally fire adapted. There are some fire adapted ecosystems where fire is very much part of the natural cycle. Many grasslands tend to be that way. Some forests, I previously lived in the redwood forest of California. Those are fire adapted systems where the trees have developed defenses against fires. That generally is not true for tropical rainforests.
So is this an effect of climate change, or is it something else?
Both. It is definitely made worse by climate change as the climate becomes hotter and drier. But fires, more often than not, fires are started by people, generally to clear land. And so there are both causes of human cause, and also climate change definitely makes the problem worse.
Yeah. So is there a lot of pollution in the rainforests? Like, for example, in the Amazon rainforest?
I would believe not. Trees have an amazing air cleaning capacity. Air is generally cleaner in forests and areas where trees are basically breathing the air. That doesn't mean there's no pollution, because there's pollution everywhere, and pollution goes where it goes. It does not respect the boundaries of countries or ecosystems or forest and non-forest. But I would expect that the air in the Amazon rainforest and other rainforests is relatively clean.
What about plastic pollution?
I would expect that there's probably not a huge amount of plastic pollution. There's certainly some. It depends on, people live in these rainforests, and the sort of in some areas where people don't live. I would be surprised if there's very much plastic. Plastic tends to get into uninhabited areas as a result of being moved, primarily through water. So like oceans tend to collect lots of plastics. They are definitely collect in rivers and are washed through rivers. So anywhere in the rainforest where, there might be a city upstream where trash ends up in the river and then washes down even into a pretty pristine rainforest. And then also settlements distributed throughout the rainforest probably do lead to plastic pollution. But in general, plastic pollution is not one of the primary threats that we think of when we think about destruction of rainforests.
Well, since you mentioned oceans, I noticed a few of your projects, I think 2 or 3, had something to do with sea life. And I'm wondering how is that connected with rainforests?
Not really. It's a very good question. Our organization is called Rainforest Trust, but we do work in systems other than rainforests. We have some grassland savanna projects, we have some dry forest projects, and we do have some marine projects. Basically, sort of more generally, we work in any threatened system in the tropics and subtropics around the world. So if an area, similar to the way we choose our terrestrial areas, if an area becomes available for purchase or designation, in the marine realm, it's more designations, areas that are available to be designated as a protected area and are important for threatened species or habitats, we will work to conserve them.
I saw you had one project about the blue-throated hill star. When I saw it, I thought it was a hummingbird, but then I read it, I was like, oh, that's not a hummingbird. What, can you maybe tell us more about it? It looked really cool.
I actually don't know much about that bird. That's a pretty new project, and I haven't had the opportunity to learn about it. I believe it's either a hummingbird or a type of hummingbird, or like closely related to hummingbirds.
Oh, so I wasn't that wrong then.
You were definitely not wrong. No.
I saw a hummingbird once when we went to Los Angeles, and they move so quickly and they're so small. It's really amazing.
Hummingbirds are amazing. In my opinion, they're one of the most amazing animals.
Yeah.
We have a hummingbird feeder in our backyard and have hummingbirds there almost every day.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Do you think these hummingbird feeders are a good idea, since we just talked about them? Because they could make them dependent, and then if we suddenly stop. I guess.
I'm sorry, you asked about hummingbird feeders or bird feeders in general?
Yeah, just if they get dependent on it, it could be a bad thing. Yes.
It could be a bad thing. I've read that doesn't really tend to be the case. I mean, I think the biggest impact that bird feeders may have is that in seasonal areas where birds migrate away for the winter, if they have a constant source of food through the winter through a feeder, they may decide to stay rather than putting the effort into migrating further south. Or in the northern hemisphere, they would migrate south anyway, which may have effects on their ability to survive in the colder environment. But in general, I've read that they actually, again, I may be wrong about this, I'm certainly not an expert, but if you have feeders and then you take the feeders away, they'll just go somewhere else to find food.
I did watch an Attenborough documentary, and he showed how they lots of people feed them just before the migration, so many of them, and then they go crossing the sea. I was like, wow, that's amazing. I mean,
it's really amazing. Yeah. Yeah, bird migration is one of the more amazing things in nature.
Yeah. Talking about birds and cats, I guess. Cats eat birds. So, are there any big cats in rainforests? think like just
There are jaguars, ocelots are small, but they're cats. Tigers.
mm. Do tigers vary between like the ones that are in the desert environments and the ones that are in the rainforest environments?
I believe they're different species. I'm not a tiger expert, so I might be wrong about that. But yeah.
So, like, except for the air pollution, how has COVID affected the animals and plants that live there in the rainforest? I mean,
I think just in the way that we've already discussed in terms of COVID has changed the way that people use the forest, and it has changed the sort of larger global economic drivers. So people might be more likely to need forest resources. There might be less enforcement, so people might be going in and hunting more. I mean, in terms of COVID impacts directly on animals, I think that animals can get COVID, but I don't know what effect it has on them. I doubt that that's an issue for rainforest animals, really.
yeah, I think I read somewhere that cats can get it, but that's a bit weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't think I had any other questions.
Okay.
I mean, at least not not too specific questions.
Sure. Well, this has been a very interesting and wide-ranging conversation.
Yeah, thank you for accepting to do this.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure, and I think you're doing really amazing work.
Thank you. And thank you all for joining us. And remember to stay responsible and use your common sense to do the right thing. Thank you. Bye.